My name is Roberta Jones, and I've been a member here 74 years. It's wonderful being back together after missing last year. We have had Homecoming Memorial Day since the early 60s, and we've never missed a year until last year. So it's wonderful being back together. Mattaponi is a really old historical church, and it goes way, way back. And we have many people that have gone out from this church to serve in the military in many wars that have threatened us. Today, we want to recognize these people and thank them for the military service that we might enjoy the freedoms that we enjoy so much in this country. We have Joseph Pollard, which is buried here, and he was in the Revolutionary War. Now, if you go out to the front of the church and look to your left, he's in the metal fence. We have the Braxtons, which are outside this door, buried here. We have Captain Jacob Lumpkin. He's also buried here. We'll hear a little more about him later. But he is outside this door. Am I right? Just barely outside. We have several from the Civil War, Franklin Hall, which we'll hear about. We also have Dr. Henley Woodward, who died at 39, and he was a surgeon in the Confederate Army. And he's buried, if you're at the front of the church, it's to the left. He has a relative, Hiram Woodward, that was here 2 years ago. And he lives in Maryland, and he couldn't be here today. He really wanted to be here, but he's not well, and so he couldn't be. We have a plaque on the wall that had 2 killed in World War I. Bernard Diggs Allen, which we'll hear about a little later. William Rowland Walton, which was killed October the 15th, 1918. We have one from World War II, Franklin Elvin Gibson, and we'll hear about him a little bit later. The program says that we're going to have Richard Harper lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Well, I'm sorry to tell you that that's not going to happen today. Richard was cleaning his pool and fell and knocked himself out and hurt himself really bad. And so he won't be here. It was just a couple of days ago. But we have his brother here today and his family, Robert. But we have Joe Seward that came to the rescue. And he goes way back in the church, history of the church. He was baptized over 75 years ago. Weren't you two when you were baptized? Yeah. He was Sunday school teacher. He was superintendent of Sunday school, deacon, and he also sang in the choir. So before we ask Joe to tell us, to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, we'd like him to tell us about the time that he was in the service. So, Joe.
I've been a member for I guess 75 years. Is that what you said? Yeah. My parents were members here. My brothers and sisters were at one time or another. I'm Joe Seward. I'm one of 5 brothers that served the military. 2 brothers, older brothers, were drafted in World War II, and two more in the Korean War. And I enlisted in the Coast Guard. I want to do something different. I enlisted in the Coast Guard with 2 of my friends, and some of you people may know him, Bill Carlton, who was a barber in West Point for 40 years after service life, and T.C. Lawson, who had an equipment place over in New Kent. Anyway, we were trained, had a basic training at Cape May, New Jersey. And I believe that was like in the fall of 52. After that, Lawson was transferred to San Juan on a buoy tender, which is a small boat, and it's a buoy tender. Bill and I were transferred up to Boston, and we were really lucky. We were transferred to an ice cutter, the East Wind. Our purpose on that ship was to carry supplies to a number of radio stations up on the Greenland coast, plus to go to the North Pole if possible. We had a radio station there to deliver. So we loaded up and took off, stopped off on the coast of Greenland a few times, unloaded some supplies, hit a bad storm that ran the Arctic Circle, and about half the crew became seasick. It was not a pleasant place to be for a day or two. And but everything straightened out okay. Our home port up there was Thule, Greenland, Thule. It's a big air base that we own in the northern part of Greenland. And that's where we tied up, and that was where the ship stayed for most of for that time. And then we came back to the States in right near Christmas time. But anyway, we were loaded up to go to the North Pole in 1953. And the captain was trying to break through some ice. It was too thick, and he kept backing up and ramming the ice, and it knocked a big hole in the starboard bow. If you don't know, that's the right side of the ship, big hole. We had to come back to the States and go into dry dock to fix it. But I want to tell you, after our first trip in 53, when we crossed the Arctic Circle, it was what they called initiation. that we had to pay the price. And it was pretty hard on the new guys, you know. I mean, one thing we had to do was they put you on one end of the mess deck, which is almost along the head back to that wall. Put an oyster in your mouth, a raw oyster, and you had to crawl up to the guys, try to be the judge, and not swallow it. If you did, you go back, start all over. That was kind of funny, and so it sort of whipped us a little bit on the way. It's part of the thing. But anyway, we came back, and like I said, went in dry dock and got the ship fixed for the 54 trip. We made 2 trips, and the same thing happened almost. We got up to Tula Air Base, and we tied up there. And of course, it was light 24 hours a day there when we were there. So we played softball after midnight watch for a couple of hours out on the docks. We loaded up and started back to the North Pole to deliver some supplies. And sure enough, we had more problems with the ice. We had a helicopter on it stay with the ship. And these guys would find a lead in the ice, which is a crack, a big crack. They'd call back and they'd try to put the ship in that crack, and they'll cut the ice, drives up on it, and sort of opens it up. And the captain, we got some really hard, thick ice, but 6 to 8 feet thick, and he kept backing up and ramming and backing up. And our ship had twin screws, we called it, and they were about 13 feet from tip to tip. And he kept doing this until he ripped the blades off one side. So we had to come back to the States in that year, in 54, yeah. And went in dry dock and had to work another 5 or 6 weeks there before we left. But for some of the guys here, it may be interesting. I knew that Jack Dempsey had a restaurant in New York City, and that's where we were tied up. That's where we were in dry dock. So 4 of us guys stopped someone and asked him about it. Might have been a cab driver. And he told us, and we finally found this Jack Dempsey's restaurant. Big letters this big on the wall. I said, oh boy, can't be any better than this. And we went in and he was in there. Wasn't a few people in, but 1 o'clock. And as soon as you saw him, we recognized him, because at the time when I was growing up, I didn't know that there were 2 boxers in the world. That was Jack Dempsey and Joe Louis. So I said, well, this is something. And he saw us. He was dressed neat and came over to the table and was talking to us. And after a while, I looked at him. I said, looks like you could go a few rounds right now. He said, bring him on. No. Wish I'd have had a picture of that. But anyway, let me get back to my notes here for a second. We left there in late '54, Tula, Greenland, and we came back and to the ship, and I was transferred from the ship down to Connecticut for a year, and I had good duty there because I was MA at the galley, and it was like every other weekend was 4 of us, two on at the time, and our leave was from noon Friday till noon Monday, and I would leave Friday on the train and come home. I'd get home about 1 or 2 o'clock Saturday morning, and I would stay at home, and I'd most times go to church, and I'd catch I had a round trip ticket, but I'd catch a plane back because I could stay at home till late Sunday, and I would catch a plane back to New York, and then I had to get on a train from there and go to Connecticut. And that wasn't a lot of fun because the train was what they called it wasn't a boxcar, but it was hot and dry, and you had to ride. It was about a 3-hour ride, I think that's where we went to. But anyway, I stayed in Connecticut for a year, and then I was transferred down to Elizabeth City, North Carolina. Had good duty down there also because we could keep our own civilian clothes and had a locker. We could leave our civilians and come back in them. And that was ASC and rescue station. And we had the pilots there, of course, and they need to get their hours in. So if you if you were off duty and you want to go with them, they would take you. Sometimes they would be just landings, practice landings. And we came to Richmond, and and it was land, go back, went to Washington, went down south on down to Georgia, I think one time. And anyway, that was a lot of fun, but it was these planes that they used in World War II, B-24s, I think, or B-17s. Some of these guys would know. And it was just a hollowed out shell-like plane, had some couple of stools sitting around in it for you to sit on. It was a lot of fun. And I was discharged from there in 1956. I spent 3.5 years in service. I left there in 56. And by the way, when I was at Elizabeth City, I used to catch a bus to Santa Cross. And I had an uncle there, my mother's brother. And I would walk from Santa Cross there over to his house, which was maybe 2 blocks. And he'd call his son, who lived across the road from him, and he'd bring me home on a Friday evening, Friday night. And just different things happen. I'm gonna tell you something that happened on the ship to me. I had some authority. I was given a box of movie reels, and I would go up to the captain's cabin every night about 6 o'clock, and we'd sit down to decide. And he was a 4-striper. I mean, he wasn't just a little nothing. He wasn't an ensign. He was equivalent to a full colonel in the Marines or the Army. So I'd go up there, and we would look through those reels because we could switch with other ships. We could switch reels and for different moves, and we'd pick one. And the captain had 3 lights on his cabin. He had a green, had a green, a yellow, and a red light, about the size of this speaker thing. And if you went up to the cabin, if the light was green, you could knock at the door and walk in. If it was yellow, you knock at the door and wait for his helper to come and open the door for you, which is fine. Red meant if you could drop dead when you walk by it, not even breathe out loud. But anyway, I always did the right thing. I hit the green, guy meet and walk in, or either if I hit the yellow, he'd come to the door. So one night, and I've been doing this for months, I hit the yellow instead of green, and then walked in, which I should have waited. Nothing was said. He came in, he sat down, and we picked a movie, and I left his cabin, and I went up to the bridge, and the officer of the day was up there. He said, "Seward?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "I have to write you up." "Why?" "Loading in the captain cabin." Well, we had a court hearing, you could call it that, but once a month for any little infraction that people got involved in. Well, I had to go to this thing, and the commander, the executive officer, was giving the captain, and he was sitting there on the deck in a nice chair and a pretty hat with all them scrabbled eggs on his hair and full gold stripes around his arm sleeves. I'm walking by a little seaman, been in service 6 months. So, and when the commander called my name, Seward, well, I walked up in front of the captain. He looked at it, he said, "Yeah," he said, "Seward thinks my cabin is the Grand Central Station." Well, I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. What? Anyway, I got 8 hours extra duty, but it wasn't anything to that because I knew the guys down in the engine room, and I went down there and read some magazines. One more little thing I want to tell you guys. No, I've already told you. I met Jack Dempsey. All right, we're going to have a pledge to the flag if you'll all stand. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thanks for listening to me.
Now, at this time, we'd like to recognize all of the military that are here in the audience. We'd like for you to stand up, give your name and what rank you're in, and then say where you were and how long.
And if you'll give me a moment, I'll get to you so that we can make sure everybody hears. We've got an audience on Zoom who's listening to us as well. They've joined our service. And so if you'll give me just a minute to get to you, I'll get you to speak into this so that they can be a part of this as well.
Okay. Everyone that was in the service, please stand. Any service. I know it's more than that. Okay.
Yep, he's already standing.
Okay. All right. Well, let's start with Ben. And Ben, give us your name and.
My name is Benjamin Hennett. I served in the United States Air Force. I served from 2010 to 2015. I was stationed at Herbert Field in Florida. I was a part of Air Force Special Operations Command, and I worked on AC-130 gunships. And then for any Vietnam guys out there, it's the current day Puff-O-Matic Dragon.
All right, how about right here?
My name is Bill Wills. I served in the United States Army. I served from 1957 to 1962.
Hello, buddy. My name's Sterling Fortune. I was on the USS Constellation, which is an aircraft carrier, and we was based out of San Diego, California.
Name is George Bryan, United States Army, 1946, 1947.
Name is David Jones. I was in the United States Marine Corps from 1977 to 1997. I retired as a gunnery sergeant. I was a cook, a marksmanship instructor, a recruiter, and a career planner.
All right, come up this side.
Robert Harper served from 1959 to 1961 and served my time in Germany.
My name is Jack Vogel. My dad was a World War I vet. My brother served in Korea, and I served 6 years in the National Guard.
Thank you, Jack.
My name is Pete Duff. I served 37 years. Now I'm in the Navy Seabees.
Thank you, Pete.
My name is Craig Lidner. I did 20 years in the Navy, retired at 2007, and I was an aircraft mechanic.
Yes, my name is Jerry Collier. I served in Virginia Army National Guard for 25 years as a combat engineer.
Did we miss anybody? Okay. Did we get everybody?
On behalf of the church, we thank all of you for your service. Now, at this time, we'd like to hear from the descendants of the military that have gone on. And we'll start with Captain Jacob Lumpkin by Betsy Roundtree.
So I'm Betsy Roundtree. I'm Stephen's wife, not related to Jacob Lumpkin, but he does have a descendant down in Florida who sent us this information. Jacob Lumpkin is believed to be the first of the Lumpkin family to arrive in the colonies. He was born in England in 1644, but immigrated to the Virginia colony. In 1676, he served at the Mattaponi fort, and he fought against the French and the Indians. He was a captain in the Virginia militia. In 1682, he settled on a plantation on the Mattaponi River in New Kent, Virginia, and the 1698 list of Virginia military officers names him as one of 4 captains in the county. He was in command of 98 men, the largest of 4 contingents. And he is buried in the oldest grave, and he's been there since 1708. And his descendant, Timothy Lumpkin, also served in the U.S. Marine Corps from 1987 to 1999, when he was honorably discharged as a staff sergeant. And I also wanted to share with you about a connection that my family has. I'm a descendant. My maiden name was Nelson. One of my ancestors is Thomas Nelson Jr., who was also a signer of the Declaration of Independence. So I've laughed and said, I bet he and Carter Braxton were best friends. I know they knew each other, and so just an interesting connection there.
Thank you, Betsy. The next one is Franklin Hall, and Valerie Hennett will tell us about him. And Valerie is the treasurer of our church. And also, you're not the treasurer, you're the clerk. She's a clerk, wrong for me. And she also did the flowers, that the flags that are on the veterans.
So my 5th great granddaddy is Franklin Bernard Hall. He's buried out here in the wrought iron fence over here. And he was born in King and Queen County on April 9th, 1835. And he died on October the 11th, 1909 at 74 years old. He served in the 34th Virginia Company, King and Queen Artillery, and his captain was John Bagby. He was 26 years old when he enlisted. He enrolled on May 29th, 1861 in Stevensville, and he enlisted on May 30th, 1861, which was 160 years ago today, which is kind of poignant if you think about it. And he was wounded in 1862, sorry. And they said that he walked home from Drury's Bluff, back home to King and Queen County after he was bandaged up. And the 34th Virginia Infantry Regiment was raised in Virginia, and it consisted of the cities of Norfolk, Richmond, Yorktown, and the counties of Gloucester, Mecklenburg, Bedford, Greene, and King and Queen. And for almost 2 years, the unit served as a heavy artillery attachment to the Department of Richmond, which was known as the 4th Heavy Artillery. And it participated in the Long Petersburg siege south of the James River and saw action in various conflicts around Appomattox. And then there's another hall that I did find that served in World War I, and that was Private John Lloyd Hall. And he served in the 58th Infantry in World War I, and that was over in France. And they also, their patch was the fleur, like you see in New Orleans. And so they got that patch from being over there and serving in France in World War I. Thank you.
Have all the relatives of Franklin Hall stand up. And you know the song. Ben is one. And who else? Here's some. Mine here. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, next is Lloyd Booth, and this will be by Ben Hennett. And Ben is our Zoom expert here. Every service and every Bible study is put on Zoom, and we need to give him a thanks for that. Ben.
Lloyd Booth was born in Tazewell County, Virginia, to Thomas and Reba Booth on December 14th, 1927. He passed on July 7th, 2003. He enlisted when he was 7 years old out of Tazewell County. He served over 30 years in the Air Force. He was a registered nurse. He retired as a technical sergeant, which is an E6, and he served in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. And because of his military occupation, he saw many places around this globe, and I know he enjoyed it very much. And I felt, I guess I felt good joining the Air Force because I knew my great granddaddy Booth was in the United States Air Force too. So.
Now, all those kin to Lloyd Booth stand. All those kin to Lloyd Booth. Okay, you got some. Okay, thank you. All right, the next one is Bernard Diggs Allen, and we'll hear from Molly Henry, which is here today. Where is? Oh, here she is. Okay.
Good afternoon. My name is Meredith Wren. Molly Henry is my cousin, and she's going to present soon. But Bernard Diggs Allen was my great uncle. My grandmother, Dorothy Allen Davis, was raised here in King and Queen Courthouse and was a member of Mattaponi and shared with us many fond memories of Mattaponi Baptist Church. My mother is here too, Roberta Davis Wren, and we have just received such a warm welcome joining you all here today from Franklin, Virginia. We appreciate it very much. Bernard Diggs Allen was my grandmother's oldest brother. He graduated from the University of Richmond with honors in history in June of 1917. On the return trip to King and Queen, he asked my grandfather to stop by the Marine Recruiting Office. He wanted to join and serve his country. We had declared war on Germany in April, and he told my great-grandmother that he thought the Marines would provide the best opportunity for him to make a difference. Records indicate that he enlisted on June 14, 1917, and was sent to France. Upon arrival, he joined the 20th Company, 3rd Battalion, 5th Marine Regiment, which arrived in France in early July. In the spring of 1918, the German army had been reinforced by troops from the Russian front, where they had been victorious. The Germans were proceeding toward Paris, following the Marne River Valley. Our great uncle's Marine Regiment was sent to reinforce our allies and to stop the Germans. They encountered them at Belleau Woods, about 50 miles east of Paris. Once they arrived, Bernard's company dug in along a wooded road across a wheat field from the Germans. Unbeknownst to the Marines, the Germans were well prepared with 3 strategically placed machine gun batteries. On June 6, the Marines, including Bernard's company, were ordered to attack the Germans across the field. At 5 p.m., Bernard's 20th Company and the adjoining company jumped out of their trenches with bayonets fixed and made their way across the field. The 3 German machine guns opened fire, halting their advance. The Marines were mowed down. A majority were either wounded or killed, including our uncle, Bernard. The Marines replaced their dead and wounded. Other reinforcements arrived, and the French artillery finally arrived and forced the Germans out of their position. On June 26, the Germans left the woods. The Marines are credited with halting the German advance. Many, including Bernard, made the ultimate sacrifice. Bernard is buried at Mattaponi Church. Many of his fellow Marines are buried in the American Cemetery at Belleau Woods. Thank you.
I remember Molly and the Burr. They were about 4 years old. They were the cutest little things you ever seen. And Molly had the prettiest red hair you ever saw. Okay, the next one is Oscar Walton, and we'll hear from his son, Bill.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Bill Walton. Before I talk about my family's connection to this church and the service that they had, I want to acknowledge my wife, Laurie's here with me today. Both her grandfathers were Marines. Her grandfather nicely served in World War II. Her father, Larry Cornwell, served in the 82nd Airborne in Vietnam. My father, Oscar Walton, was in the Army. His brother, Bobby Walton, was in the Air Force. My uncle Tom Worthington, who was married to Christine, he was in the Air Force as well. And you heard from my uncle George Bryan, who's here with us today. He served in World War II. We're very proud of a service that our family has with the military and specifically to this church. And it's an honor to be here with y'all today. Thank you.
How many Waltons are here? I know some are here. Well, there, okay. Yeah. Now, Grace and I were in the same class with Oscar Walton. We graduated with him. And one of the big things of each year with the school was to have May Day. And Oscar was the king that year. So the next person is Franklin Elvin Gibson, and Barbara Bafford, the niece, will talk about that.
Good afternoon. My husband's bringing my mom up here. This is Franklin's sister. I am humbled to be asked to speak about my uncle, Franklin Alvin Gibson, a plaque to whose memory you see hanging from these church walls. There's a picture of him over here on the piano organ here as well. Frank was born on May the 2nd, 25, one of 13 children to his parents, George and Cora Gibson. My mother, Edna Gibson Norman here, is Frank's sister. As I was not privileged to know my Uncle Frank personally during his lifetime, I asked Mom what she remembered about her brother Frank. She told me that she was a little more than 7 years younger than her brother, Frank. His middle name, Alvin, was after his mother's brother, who was also named Alvin. Mom said that Frank dated a girl named Edna Brizendine. She would remember that. Who was Robert Archer Shackelford's wife's sister. Now, this is 75 years ago. Mom also remembered that although their father threw a fit when Frank was called to service, Frank willingly answered the call. He was inducted in the United States Army at Fort Lee near Petersburg, Virginia in June of 1944 at the age of 19. He was assigned to the 143rd Infantry Regiment, 36th Infantry Division, and after basic training was sent to Europe to face Nazi Germany. On February the 4th, 1945, while engaging the enemy in Alsace-Lorraine region of France near the German border, Private First Class Franklin Alvin Gibson was killed by machine gun fire. Receiving the news of Frank's death was a very difficult time for his family. It seemed like the war in Europe was a long way from King and Queen County, and to lose a son and a brother was hard to accept at that time. Frank's body was brought back to Mattaponi Baptist Church for burial, My mother remembered that they had a military service with loud shooting of guns that would deafen your brains. And the family was presented an American flag for his service in addition to a Purple Heart medal for wounds received in action. It is sad to think that Frank was killed only 3 months before the end of the war in Europe on May the 8th, 1945, when Germany surrendered. But had he and millions of others not served, where would we be today? Would a United States even exist? Please do not allow Frank's story and the honor of our nation to fade with the memory of those of our greatest generation who gave their full measure of devotion to their country for the preservation of our freedom. Remember that the real reason for the observance of Memorial Day is to honor the men and women who marched, flew, sailed, parachuted, and stood at the gates of hell to rescue those in peril and to prevent evil from overtaking the world. For Frank's service, bravery, and sacrifice, we are forever grateful. The body of Franklin Alvin Gibson is interred in the cemetery not far from the doors of this church, just off here. I am assured, however, that since the hour of his death on February the 4th, 1945, he has been kept safe with the Lord Jesus Christ in his eternal home, not built with hands.
Now, we'll ask Mary Peace to come forward, and she has something she wants to say. And this is a niece also.
Yes, Mary Elizabeth, that's right. I'm Mary Elizabeth Peace. I'm Robert Henry's, Gibson's daughter. My daddy was Frank's brother. And I want to read this. My grandmother wrote this after Frank died. And it's kind of sad on how she felt. But she said, 2 months since the sad telegram came stating our son, Private Franklin Gibson, 19, was killed in Eastern Germany, France on February the 4th, 1945. He had been in service 7 months and had been overseas for 3 months. We little thought when leaving home that you would never return, that you so soon in death would sleep and leave us here to mourn. You crossed the river, son, you could not say goodbye, but we hope to meet you some sweet morning. In the sweet by and by, we sit here in the evening after we are alone, wishing, hoping, and longing. If you could only come home, I have had my share of sorrow. I have a heavy loss, but for the sake of Jesus, I will try to bear my cross. Rest on, dear son, in the foreign land. Your memories will live on. God knew you needed rest and peace. 'Twas he was touched your hand, mother and dad, and she signed it, coming to Virginia. And this was a service April the 15th for Private Gibson Memorial Service for PFC Franklin Gibson will be held at Mattaponi Baptist Church on April the 15th, 1945 at 4 p.m. Private First Class Gibson, who was killed in action in Germany on February the 4th, 1945, served with the 143rd Infantry Regiment. Beside his parents, he's survived by 5 brothers, Robert, Perry, Edward, Willie, and CC. Also 6 sisters, Mr. Roy Lawson, his mom in the service. And he was buried in Germany. And he was later, his body was sent home by my grandparents after he had been buried there, and they buried him here, and the family applied at Mattaponi Baptist Church with full honors. And I want to thank all the servicemen. I want to thank my Uncle Franklin and their families who served in the military and serving today for our sacrifices for us to have freedom today. And may God bless America.
I knew Franklin when I was a really small child. Ellen and I did. And he used to love to come to the Daddy's store, which is real close by here. And he taught us how to play marbles, didn't he, Ellen? And when he knew he was going into service, he said, you know, y'all write to me in the service. And so we did. And we thought it was wonderful to get a letter from the serviceman. And the last letter we wrote him came back to us, which was real sad.
One of the things I'm so glad that I had that recording to this day, so I was able to go back and hear a lot of his comments about his service in his own words with that. That ship, as Dad said very vividly, he remembered, had 30 doctors, 30 nurses, 185 medical corpsmen, and a little over 300 men that made up the crew, and they could care for 800 patients. They had 72 wards there. And that ship went through 9 separate Korean War campaigns. It was very active. They supported the 1st and 7th Marine Divisions. And one of the comments that Dad said, in the wintertime on the ship, it was extremely cold with that area of Korea. And if you've seen those old episodes of MASH where they try to relay how cold the Korean winters were, apparently that was very accurate with that. So their ship would stay in Korean waters for about 3 months at a time. And then Dad said they would go into Japan and they would offload the soldiers that were the most injured, the long-term injured soldiers, and restock, and then they'd leave Japan and go back onto their posts they had there. Now, his activities on there, being a hospital ship, the crew was all very, very active in unloading wounded people. So the transports would come beside and they had cranes and they would raise them up. A little bit later into the war, they put a helipad on and they could land the helicopters directly on the ship there. So did lots of that. And being a hospital ship, they spent the rest of the time doing maintenance like you wouldn't believe, cleaning and maintaining, because it was a big white ship. And Dad said the rust was something about the white paint and the rust in the salt water that kept them very, very busy with that. So he did that. And I didn't know this until I did the interview. Dad was actually originally drafted into the Army. So he got his notice to go into the Army in Richmond. So he went to the office, and Dad, growing up on the water, he said, well, I really want to join the Navy. So the gentleman in the Army said, well, if you go down the street there to the Navy recruiter, if they call me, I'll take you off the list. So Dad said he ran as hard as he could down Broad Street and went into the Navy recruiting office and joined the Navy, and they called up, and that's how he came in there. Dad was certainly very proud of his service. He made a lot of lasting friendships over the years there. Dad said that they shipped them from the East Coast to California for the first part, and they were in a open train car. I never could quite understand it, but an older train car that was pulled by a coal-fired locomotive. So by the time they got to California, everything that they had looked like a coal miner. He said he sent some clothes home to my grandmother, and she never could get them clean because of that coal dust. Then they boarded a narrow transport ship and went from California to Pearl Harbor to get on the hospital ship. And Dad said that ship rolled a lot. Now, Dad never got seasick, but apparently, according to his stories, everybody else did. So he told me he strategically picked an upper bunk on that trip over there for obvious reasons with that. But he never got seasick. Dad, of course, missed his family, but he enjoyed seeing the world there, and he enjoyed the work that ship did. He was asked if he was scared, and he said, well, I don't know if I knew enough to be scared. He said there were times in which they had to darken their ship because those hospital ships were intentionally lit up with that. And then there's a particular story. His ship is credited. They went through a 30-mile stretch. It was a very narrow channel that still had ship mines in it, and they went up and they rescued 750 wounded UN soldiers that were trapped behind the line. So that was one of their largest things. But Dad said that particular one, they had them all put on their life vests and they had to move up to an upper deck and because they weren't sure what's going to happen. A couple of humorous things I'll leave you with, and he taught me. Dad said they had a lot of brass on the ship. And at that time, it was hard to figure out how to clean the brass. Well, one of them discovered that ketchup worked very well on the brass, I guess the acid. So they used a lot of ketchup to shine the brass on the ship, which was interesting. And the other one he described, apparently they were issued blue jeans that were very thick and heavy, dark material work pants. And none of the guys, according to him, wanted to have these stiff, dark-looking pants. I guess they wanted to look like Old Salt or something. So Dad said they would take their jeans and they would tie a rope to them and throw them off the back of the ship. And they would drag those jeans in the wake of the ship and it would bleach them out. So I guess they made the first stonewashed jeans there. Now they charge you extra for that with that. So, but anyway, that's enough stories that I'll share with you there. But I will tell you how proud my dad was to be in the service. And again, like I said, he wore his veterans hats for many years to the end, and he certainly loved his country.
How many are here that are kin to Dick? I know we've got his wife, his daughter, and son, and so forth. And I'm a what? Sister-in-law. Sister-in-law. Okay. Yeah. And Dick was also a deacon, and he was a trustee of the church. Next, we'll hear about Herbert Bertram by Herbie.
Thank you. As she said, I'm Herbert Jr. I'm Herbie Bertram, as most people call me around here. My father was Herbert Bertram. He was one of 7 brothers that served in the military. He was actually the only one that served outside the Navy. All his other brothers went in the Navy. Dad actually tried to enter the service into World War II, but he was 12 years old and they didn't let him in. My wife used the term, she said it was a pride in country. Well, it could have been pride in country, or the fact my grandma had 13 kids and it was a way to, get fed probably. So he, well, of course, then again, he was coming out of the Great Depression. So he joined the Air National Guard when he came of age. And then he transitioned from the Air Guard into the Air Force during the Korean War. And he actually did not go anywhere. They didn't go overseas anyway. His regiment didn't go out. So they stayed in country. And then, but he talked about stories of traveling around the country, different places they had been. And I mean, he enjoyed his time in the military. And then when the Korean War was over, then he actually served another 7 years still in the Air National Guard. Very proud of being a part of the military, but especially the Air Guard. He actually built a memorial in the front gate of going into the Air National Guard base. But I believe since they moved and they redesigned the entrance and everything down at the airport, I think they took all that down. I have pictures of it, and it was a really, it was a nice built thing. So he Dad, he enjoyed being a big part of the church. He was also a deacon, and he even mowed grass here at the church for a period of time. So, and that's it.
He was also a trustee. How many are here that are kin to Herbert? I know it's some. Okay. All right, next we'll have Welford Seward by Larry Seward, his son.
Hello, I'm Larry Seward. I'm Wilton Welford Seward Jr.'s son. He was drafted in World War II. I know he was in the motor pool. He didn't speak much about it. We were kids. Actually, he never talked about it. I know he was stationed in Germany, and I found out that his unit, shortly after D-Day, went ashore and they worked on the vehicles. I think he worked on like the 2.5 ton and below vehicles. And he was in France, in Germany. And then he was discharged in January of 46. And he passed away way too young. He was only 61. So, but thank you. I know he enjoyed it. We come to this church a many a time. I'm Joe's nephew. So he was Deity was one of his brothers that had gone into World War II. And so I like coming down here because it brings back a lot of memories. So thank you.
Now, all those that are kin to Welford, it's a lot of people here kin to Welford. You and Joe, your brother, Grace, he's got two brother and sister here today. All right, the last one we have is Charlie Seward, Bernard Seward, Roland Seward, and Tracy will talk about them. And she's niece.
All right. So, as Dad mentioned, it was 5 brothers that went into the service with the Sewards, and all 5 came back, which we know didn't happen too often back then. And so Charlie, my uncle, he served in World War II, and he served under General Patton, and he served in Enzio, Italy. He left Enzio and went to Germany and also to North Africa. So he was right in the midst of it, like many are today. I can share with you just a quick little story that Dad shared with me recently, where you were in the car when you were a teenager and you and someone were going to the store. And with Charlie, it would be as much as a year or maybe even more before his parents or his mother would hear from him. So you can imagine, as a mother, not knowing what is going on. And so Dad and his buddy were in the car going to the store, and a car was coming towards them, blinking the lights, and they stopped, and it was Charlie, when he had been gone for as much as a year or more. And since she had heard from him, seen him, anything, and so you all picked him up on the road and brought him home, and your mother was just in tears. She was so overjoyed to see him. And he has children that, I'm sorry, couldn't be with us today. My Uncle Roland Seward served in the Korean War. And also I just want to mention my Aunt Helen, also we know her as Louise, her husband.
So my mother was pregnant with me, and I had a brother, and they came down to stay at the courthouse. My dad was deployed to Casablanca. He was in artillery or anti-aircraft. That was the ground division that was to down the airplanes. So they were sent where that was a possibility. They did the battles in Northern Africa, and the Germans were chased out. The next assignment, and my mother could never know where he was. She would write letters, but there was no destination because it was top secret. His next assignment was Anzio. He was in the second landing of Anzio. The first landing caused a lot of American deaths. He was dug in at Anzio for 6 months, living in foxholes. The bombs were unrelenting. Finally, the Navy planes came over and rescued them. So they went up through the boot of Italy, freeing the Italians from the Germans. They were then sent to southern France, entering Marseille, and made their way up through France, chasing the Germans out. Our fathers met in Paris. Her father was in a command position and was able to get a position for my father to go home. And so in 1945, he went to Chicago and helped all of the servicemen coming home to reestablish themselves. There's 2 things I remember. One, whenever there was a loud noise, my dad would duck. He thought it was a bomb or the reaction, you know. And the second thing someone mentioned earlier, he didn't talk about it. And I think that
dads talk about it.
Yeah.
They never talk about the war.
No.
So they must have seen a lot that they just wanted to go on living in the present and the future. But we're very grateful to our memories here and our lives here and this church. And thank you for having this Memorial Day.
Yes, and for all who planned it. These are the two ladies that I remember as little kids. They must have been about 4 or 5, something like that. And I remember Molly having the prettiest red hair. Uh-huh. Sure, sure. Billy wants to say something. Come on up front if you want to. Okay, fine. Why don't you tell a little bit about him? Richard was a very high 23 years in the Navy. And it was a retired colonel. We go back many years. This year, we've known him for 80 years. We started in the first grade and Pleasant Hill. And we've been friends all through the years. Robert was here today. Richard is still the same Richard. He's a highly decorated. I know at least 2 Purple Hearts. Billy, tell him about being wounded and things like that. He was a helicopter pilot. Rescue was and he sat down on a horse nest. They set up shooting at him. He made his rounds and come back. And he flew it over. And the explorer said, "Sir, are you going to get all of us?" He said, "I'm not losing every one of us." And he got bullets in his hips, in his back, and he was trying back to the hospital. And one of the bullets had hit one of the lines, and it was very suffering. He said he didn't know whether it was his blood or whether it was my war. But we went to land, and the guy said, "You can't answer." He said, "Sir," he said, "I'm going out of this hospital. I got 5 wounded people on me. And also, me and my co-pilot were also wounded. You stop any other airplane because I'm coming in." And the name of his helicopter was Bonnie Sue. And his co-pilot has written me a book. If you ever get the chance, get the book and read it. You'll see what kind of hero Dick Hawk was. This church, I know, is proud of him because he started here, he met Jesus here, and he still loves him. He was baptized about 75 years ago. We're just delighted that so many have come out today. We just appreciate it so much. And it just means a lot for us, for you to come back year after year. And so we look for you next year, and put this on your calendar and make sure that it's always the Sunday right by Memorial Day, so that you can remember it. We'll have our benediction now by David Fitzgerald. He's a member of this church, and he's also a deacon.
Thank you, Roberta. It was a great day, wasn't it? I ate too much. I'm glad I'm off tomorrow. I take one of those 20-hour naps, you know. Let's go to the Lord in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for our freedoms. We thank you for those that served. We thank you for those that continue to serve. We honor those, Lord, who paid the ultimate sacrifice. We thank you for the services today, for the efforts associated with organizing this event, and we thank you for the rich history of this church. As we part ways, we pray for your peace and your protection, and just grant us wisdom through your word. Thank you again for your blessings and for this special time. In Jesus' name. And all of God's people said, amen.
there's a history of Mattaponi Baptist Church in the back if you'd like to pick one up as you leave.